Hey there friends, my name's Jim and today I'd like to talk about the US funded biolabs in Ukraine. Wait, what? You didn't hear about the US funded biolabs in Ukraine? Well, it's no big deal because Putin kinda blew them into smithereens as soon as he waltzed over the border into Ukraine. This story has been particularly interesting to follow, but I didn't want to put it out there in case it was propaganda because there's been so much of that flowing from either side until I got a chance to verify some of it. And that has happened today, so come along with me and I will ride this crazy train with you and try to explain what we're passing by. Before we get into it, I just wanted to remind you that this channel lives and dies on your sharing it. YouTube actively shadow bans all of my videos, which sounds crazy, but if you think I'm lying, check out the views of my Bob Saget video to see what happens when that doesn't happen. So, anyways, please copy the link in your URL bar, send it to a friend, like, share, subscribe, and if you think what I do is valuable, feel free to support me in the support links below and visit jimmyjams.xyz. Now, with all of that out of the way, you may be thinking, what the fuck are you on about, Jim? And I honestly don't blame you. So much of our media machine in the last, I don't know, years really, has been for pushing Russia to be seen as the bad guy. And anything anti-Ukraine or like pro-Russian feels like propaganda. But this isn't even anti-Ukraine or pro-Russian. This is just explaining the facts on the ground. But even that can be seen as propaganda if you have been primed properly. The truth is, this very well could have been propaganda, which is why I waited to put out the video until today when I saw this positive confirmation between Senator Marco Rubio and the Undersecretary of State for Political Affairs, Victoria Nuland. I found Rubio's well poisoning question particularly interesting, so let's take a quick look at that.
Well, I only have a minute left. Let me ask you, does Ukraine have chemical or biological weapons?
Ukraine has biological research facilities, which, in fact, we are now quite concerned Russian forces may be seeking to gain control of. So we are working with the Ukrainians on how they can prevent any of those research materials from falling into the hands of Russian forces should they approach.
I'm sure you're aware that the Russian propaganda groups are already putting out there all kinds of information about how they've uncovered a plot by the Ukrainians to release biological weapons in the country and with NATO's coordination. If there's a biological or chemical weapon incident or attack inside of Ukraine, is there any doubt in your mind that 100% it would be the Russians that would be behind it?
There is no doubt in my mind, Senator, and it is classic Russian technique to blame on the other guy what they're planning to do themselves.
So you see there, Rubio starts by simply asking, does Ukraine have any biological or chemical weapons? And when she affirms that in fact they do, he did an amazing job at preemptively taking the responsibility away from the Zelensky regime and having her outright say that if you hear anything about any bioweapons used against the Russians, it's definitely false. Yeah, because the Russians are the only ones who would ever use biological warfare because for some reason in between these two countries we have Ukraine and we have Russia. Literally genetically the same people. They are the same people on one side of the other. There's different ethnicities and stuff, but what I mean is, for some reason we're displaying the Russians as if they are a unique type of evil, as if the type of people who live in Russia are just uniquely horrible and evil and immoral and degenerate in every way. But everybody in Ukraine is perfect angels and they're so great and they could never do anything bad. So you can see why they would want to say that if biological weapons were used, they would only be used by the Russians. So if there were any biological weapons used in this conflict and Russians were hurt by it, well, then it was Russia planting a false flag. Remember those several weeks of false flags that the US was saying was going to happen in Russia to allow Putin to invade? Maybe he invaded before they could do their false flag because he's like, well, if they're just going to false flag me either way, I might as well actually go forward with it. Now, that to be fair, that's just speculation. Biden and Pelosi and all those people know way better than I do. And this Secretary Undersecretary of State of Political whatever she was. Yeah, I guess she knows better about how Zelensky just has a moral stance against using biological weapons in a conflict where he could literally lose the sovereignty of his country. But he would never use them. So what happened to that day 1 air superiority? Well, we're on day 12, so I can say that they're probably pretty far from that goal still, considering they're getting their asses handed them a little bit. So why were they bombing areas as far west as Lviv? Well, maybe it'll paint a bit of a clearer picture if I show you this map here, which represents all of the airstrikes that were done on the first couple of days of the campaign. And let's phase that into the locations of all of the US-backed biological weapons facilities. Paints a bit of a clearer picture that way, don't it? So once the strike started, some rather clever individuals started connecting the dots. They noticed the same pattern of where the strikes were hitting was where these labs were that happened to be listed on the United States Department of Defense website as, among other things, veterinary research clinics. Because the DoD is definitely spending millions of dollars making doggy Viagra all the way in Ukraine, for some reason. Well, as soon as the spooks who keep an eye on 4chan noticed people talking about it on there, the DoD website was fully scrubbed of any information about the US biological weapons labs. Somehow, even the really smart boomers in power don't get that when something on the internet, it's there forever. And I got the receipts. And since you have surely and will surely from here on start hearing about the United States and Ukraine side of the argument, I figured we should visit Sputnik and see what their side of the argument was, because this is Russian state news, it's their international news, in the same way that CNN or Fox News is United States state news, or the BBC or the CBC in Canada are Britain's and Canada's state news, or Al Jazeera is Qatar's state news in the same way. So, before you say this is a Russian state media thing, yeah, I know, all media is state media at this point, but let's take a quick look, read through this, you tell me what you think. So, this is by Ilya Tuskanov. The U.S. Embassy in Kiev has been caught in the center of a brewing political scandal after denying allegations about U.S. biological laboratories' quote-unquote unlawful activity in Ukraine, while admitting that such labs do exist. The U.S. Embassy in Kiev has scrubbed information about the work of 2 of its biolabs in Ukraine from its website, Viktor Medvedchuk, co-leader of the opposition platform For Life Party, has alleged. According to the lawmaker, in its April 22nd statement responding to RADA lawmakers' mid-April request for a government investigation into the 15 U.S. biolabs operating on Ukrainian territory, the U.S. Embassy provided a link to the explanation about the operation of its, quote, biological threat reduction program. Remember, these were labeled in their funding documents as veterinarian research clinics. So in these statements where they admit that they're actually biological pathogen laboratories, they're admitting that they were lying, and it definitely implies that some shady stuff was going on. But there are 2 interesting facts associated with the document, Medvedchuk alleges. First, that the webpage was created on April 9th, 2020, 3 days before lawmakers made their request for a government inquiry, and second, that there are discrepancies between the English and Ukrainian versions of the page. Quote, the Ukrainian language document appeared earlier, but in 2017 featured another version of the document, now deleted, including the text, quote, inside of quote, consolidation of particularly hazardous pathogens in modern biosafety level facilities. 1 level 3 biosafety lab for human pathogens and 1 level 3 biosafety lab for animal pathogens, Medvedchuk explained in a statement on Monday. In other words, in 2017, the U.S. Embassy not only openly curated at least 2 level 3 biolabs, but openly stated this. This is not proof that there have not been other, more dangerous laboratories, or that these laboratories have not conducted experiments with pathogens presenting the maximum level of danger, but it does indicate a desire by the U.S. Embassy to remove information that compromises them, Medvedchuk claimed. And then this is her talking. This is Nina Byzantia tweeting about it, obviously. Well-known Ukrainian pundit wonders what 15 biolabs funded by the Pentagon are doing in Ukraine. In response to MP's request for info, the U.S. Embassy said this is a matter of safe storage and research. Ukraine's opposition platform, For Life, requested a government probe into the operation of US Biolabs in Ukraine on April 15th, claiming that since these labs' deployment, Ukraine has faced mysterious outbreaks of otherwise inexplicable dangerous diseases, such as the 2009 outbreak of hemorrhagic pneumonia, the 2011, 2014, and 2015 cholera outbreaks, and an outbreak of hepatitis A in 2017. In early 2016, at least 20 Ukrainian servicemen were reported to have died from a flu-like virus, with 364 more people succumbing to swine flu months later. Quote, "The Ukrainian people have the right to know about secret programs," the opposition lawmakers' appeal stressed. Now, I would very much like to stress that when they're talking about this lawmaker, he is not a Russian lawmaker. This is a Ukrainian lawmaker. He's of the opposite party of Zelensky's, so he's like the Trump to our Biden, but he's the one saying, yeah, we have these labs here, I would know, I'm a politician here. And he goes on to speak more about shady labs and post-Soviet issues and things like that. I just wanted to point out that it has not been denied by any government that these labs do exist. That is an important fact for what I'm about to show you next here. But of course, people in Russia, people in Ukraine, and people in Belarus are not the only people talking about these labs. Actually, we have here Chinese official, quote, "The US has 336 labs in 30 countries under its control, including 26 in Ukraine alone. It should give a full account of its biological military activities at home and abroad and subject itself to multilateral verification." Now, the video is just him speaking in Chinese with the lady translating. Feel free to go and check this tweet out by @ASB Military, very good source for this stuff. It's kind of ironic that China is now saying that they need a full account of our biological military activities, but for reasons I can't say on YouTube, makes a bit of sense. And of course, you can see the fact checkers. Let's see what USA Today said on the 25th, right when the story started coming around. Fact check. False claim of US biolabs in Ukraine tied to Russian disinformation campaign. The claim, there are biolabs in Ukraine funded by the US government. Blah, 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 blah. A post shared on Facebook on Thursday shows a map of Ukraine pinpointing what the poster asserts are exclusive US biolabs in Ukraine that are funded by the US DoD. By now, I think most everybody knows about Ukraine/WW3, reads the post, which amassed more than 400 interactions in a day. So what do we know about this? First off, USA Today, really? 400 interactions? That's news? It may be news because these actually are there, and somebody probably called you up and said, hey, tell them they aren't. The post misrepresent a treaty between the United States and Ukraine aimed at preventing biological threats. The labs are owned and funded by the Ukrainian government, according to the Security Service of Ukraine, the country's main security agency. The ad agency and U.S. embassies in Ukraine have said that the claim of U.S. labs is false. Numerous reports indicate it is tied to a years-long Russian disinformation campaign aimed at discrediting the United States. So, if you can read between the lines there, they're saying, false claim of U.S. biolabs in Ukraine tied to a Russian disinformation campaign. What you need to know about these fact checks is that they put it in the title because they know people will read the title. People like you who are watching this video would actually click on the link and read the information, but 99% of people who aren't watching this video will just read the headline, click in their brain that it's a lie, and then they'll move on with their day. However, if they went on to read the article, they would notice that the post misrepresent a treaty between Ukraine aimed at preventing biological threats. They're owned and funded by the Ukrainian government. Now, that's not saying the labs aren't there. They're just saying that they screwed up on the funding part of it. This part here where it says the labs are owned and funded by the Ukrainian government, that is a 100% provable lie. Provable lie by the receipts showing how much each facility received in United States DoD payments. Which I will add the description with the actual documents so you can go and take a look yourself if you feel like it. So, what do we have here altogether? So, we have Russia has been saying for many, many, many years that the US and Ukraine have been creating bio weapons on its borders. They go into Ukraine, they bomb all of these facilities, and then the talk starts going around and everybody starts saying, no, there was never any funding. This never happened. This is Russian disinformation. And they know they can get away with it because there's war propaganda going every which way. So you will hear about the story in the coming days. You will hear about this being misinformation because now it's actually starting to break out into the mainstream. The fact that Marco Rubio questioned that lady shows that the government is worried enough about this, that enough of us are showing them, that enough of us are listening. In case you haven't followed along up to this point, I'll spell it out plainly. Zelensky does not care about the lives of the great people of Ukraine. Just like Biden or Trudeau or Macron or Merkel or any of these Western leaders that are generally placed in their positions, none of these leaders gives a rat's ass about the common man or woman who they claim to represent. Case in point, for the past 3 days, Russia and Ukraine have agreed again and again to allow what's called a humanitarian corridor, a road away from Kiev that nobody's allowed to fire upon for citizens to leave before the Russians start their primary attack. They're doing this because they know that if Russia were to shell a city with 400,000 civilians in it, that would probably get NATO to officially step in. Now, of course, Ukraine is saying Russia is the one shelling them, but think about it a bit. Time and time again, it's been shown that Zelensky and his regime are absolutely fine with putting civilians in harm's way, starting with handing out weapons to untrained people and telling them to throw Molotov cocktails at tanks. Well, you know what happened? Well, first, of course, all the people that you gave guns to went and settled their scores in the streets. And while handing out free guns and bombs and stuff sounds really fucking awesome, what it actually does is make your civilians into combatants and forces Russia to consider any Ukrainian they see as a potential threat. See, there are legally binding rules of engagement for people who don't want it to be declared war criminals. Now, of course, in a war, you're going to commit war crimes because you generally don't care about the other nation's reaction. But you can tell that Putin's trying very, very hard to not commit war crimes. He didn't care as much in Syria when he was using the vacuum bombs, the thermobaric bombs that, quote-unquote, suck the oxygen out of your lungs. Really, they just blow you away. You wouldn't have time to notice the oxygen getting sucked out of your lungs. But people are making that bomb sound scarier than it is. But the Russians generally have to follow what's called the rules of engagement, and part of the rules of engagement are generally you do not just start shooting at civilians, because you look really, really bad, and then people start calling you a criminal, and then maybe other places get involved in the altercation. If those people were to get hurt, and Russians were to say that they thought they were combatants, Ukraine says that no, they knew that they were civilians. Well, that helps push up the anger at Russia and helps make very, very powerful propaganda for Ukraine. A video just came out today where a tank was shooting at a car, killed 2 civilians. But just a couple of days ago, there was a video that came out of 2 videos that I saw of Ukrainians throwing Molotov cocktails on tanks. One chick caught her arm on fire. But again, like I said, you're turning these civilians into armed combatants. And all these people who say they want to fight for their country, yada, 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 well, you won't let them in the military, so why are you handing them weapons? Unless you're just trying to completely confuse the rules of engagement so that Russia does something that is considered a war crime, and then NATO comes in. As a matter of fact, there was another incident that just happened, I believe, the day before yesterday, where there was all of this talk that came out about how Russia was shelling a nuclear facility and blowing it up, and it was going to cause the biggest problem since Chernobyl. Zelensky came out and spoke to the entire Senate of the United States and said that this is the reason that the United States and NATO need to get involved, because of the shelling of the nuclear station, and do a full no-fly zone in Ukraine, meaning if any Russian plane were to fly in Ukraine, the United States comes over and shoots them down. That would obviously cause World War III, and Zelensky knows it. You know what else Zelensky knew at that time that we didn't know? The facility hadn't been shelled. It was a fire in a building directly next to it. They even put out a video with the people in the nuclear facility saying, "Please, Russians, stop shooting at this facility," when they were never shooting at that facility. Again, the point that I'm trying to make here above all is don't listen to the propaganda. I'll say it again here. Something everybody here needs to remember, especially Ukrainians, is that Zelensky cares about you as much as Putin or Biden does. He was plucked from an obscure TV show by US and Ukrainian oligarchs to become the head of the US regime in Ukraine because it was geopolitically important for us, it was strategically important, and it was becoming a little too friendly with Russia back in 2014. Now, Zelensky, he's been the biggest seat of power that he can ever hope to hold, and he'll do anything not to be deposed. Russian soldiers, Ukrainian soldiers, it's nothing but another bloody brother war to line the pockets of the elites. Don't get played. Anyways, guys, thanks for watching my video. Please tell me what you think about this. I know that I'm probably coming out sounding a little bit harsh on the Ukraine side. I've interviewed Ukrainians. I have Ukrainian friends. I want them to survive and thrive and have a wonderful life. I hate the regimes that control all of Western society. So, if you want to tell me that I'm wrong, please comment below, share it, have everybody spam this video with how wrong I am. That would be absolutely wonderful. And if you'd like to visit my other links below, I have support links, Locals, Patreon, Odyssey, Rumble, I upload over there too. And if you'd like to go to jimmyjams.xyz, that is my personal website with all my content on it. Till next time, guys.